Oh, good to know.
Yeah.
All right, well, it's after 4, so
I know,
you might as well get this going.
Because I'm like one of those pack rats that saves
So at this point, I guess you make your microphone green. I guess I'd like to call to order today's March 17th regularly scheduled BPW meeting, starting with the invocation and pledge. Bill's not here yet. I don't know if he's coming or not. Haven't heard. Not. He might just be late. Anyway, Lord, we thank you for all the blessings you have bestowed on us. In your name, allow us to provide the best results from this meeting that benefit all our residents and employees. Grant that we are fair, just, and project positive, ongoing operations that benefit the community. With our thoughts and actions, allow us to serve your will. In your name, amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'm going to need a motion to approve the consent agenda for February.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do we have anybody listed for comments from the audience? I haven't seen the list. Okay. Moving right along. Darren, if you could hit us with your general manager report.
I will jump right in. If you've read the report, first thing up is our emergency response and preparation. While I was writing this, the end of last week, Thursday and Friday, we had a pretty good storm on its way, and they had upgraded the risk for the northeast Missouri, all along the Missouri eastern coast. Said that we had some bad problems coming with storm, with possible straight winds, which have been very problematic in the past. So I put down a little bit about what we do and the things that we do. We always want to provide utilities that are safe and reliable. So as I was writing it, we were watching. What we did is we go through, and on a monthly basis, we have meetings with all of the local emergency areas, from fire, police, 911 call out. We have the all of the ambulance services. We've got the hospitals that are represented, and on a monthly basis, we sit down and go through all of those responses, what are needed. We have our the main officer there is Chief Jacob Nocky, who takes and coordinates those meetings and makes sure they're held. On an annual basis, we have a tabletop exercise, and that is what we do on a grander scale, so that we were all prepared. And we have many ways of communicating, both by specifically from the dispatch and radio. We also have it by text and an app that we use. We have many forms of communication so that we're coordinating our effort and always helping out. We have trees that will come down, and so the police want to make sure things are safe, but we want to make sure that the police are safe, and so we're coordinating and talking. We want to make all the first responders able to get in. As we began, we also looked at ourselves, because we, in the BPW, we have almost our own community inside. We have a couple of ways of people getting information to us. We have our SCADA system, where we have a live person answering phones 24/7 in our SCADA department. So when there's outages after hour, when there's any of those problems, they call, they're able to get a human being, so long as they're not busy. But in an emergency such as this, we anticipate that there will be more. So we have our front office, our customer service representatives, they're available, and they can begin receiving phone calls. So we take and funnel all that information to a central point of decision making. That person is either myself or Matt Munslinger, our Director of Operations. We communicate and we determine whether we need to have an emergency called in and of ourselves, or if it's able to be managed and controlled. But all of those outages and all that information comes to that one person. Decisions are then made, and then it's dispersed again out to, we've got our electric division, we've got our water and sewer, who supports most of the time when we have storms. It's usually an electric outage. That's probably the most common when it comes to winds and lightning and those things. This storm, we ended up having a strike that took out one circuit. It started sort of at the HLG area, and I believe we had about 200 people out in total. And by the time it was 8:45 approximately, we had everybody back in and on and running, and we had no further problems. We could have had it worse. One of the things that we have done is that we have, for the last 5 years, what we did is decided that we needed to make sure that the easements around our power lines, and if you were to take a power line and you draw a 9-foot circle around each of our power lines, we have an easement of the right to come in and cut all the limbs and trees that are away from that. So if you have one pole, you've got 3 power lines. Each one of those has that 9 foot, and we will take and we remove all the branches, trim, trees, etc. outside of that easement, so that when the wind does blow or those do topple, they don't come into those lines and take it out. There are still some trees that are larger than that we would love to be able to get rid of and move, but we don't have that right. And so we will never be 100% clean and clear of trees. But with our aggressive efforts, we have been able to see the number of emergencies and call-outs needed to replace and restore decrease pretty significantly. And we believe that the cost that we've put into that additional tree trimming has paid dividends and will continue to do so. The other thing that I put in here is that we hope that everything went well outside of here, but we know that down in the Boot Hill in Poplar Bluffs, they had some pretty significant, they had tornadoes that touched down, and an MOU, which we are part of, a memo of understanding and interagency agreements. We have actually sent a crew down to Poplar Bluff, and they're helping to restore things that are down there. We anticipate that our crew will be coming back. It's a crew of 5 men plus equipment, that they'll be coming back probably tomorrow or perhaps Wednesday. We've already received, Erica shared it with me, a wonderful email from a citizen down in Poplar Bluff that was just absolutely over the moon because of the service that our men had provided, that it was a home that had a person in a wheelchair that was in need, and for them to take the time to do the additional work to make that happen just as quickly as possible. They were very grateful, and it was just great to see that. Someday, we will be needing that. We know it will happen. In spite of all our being proactive, all of the decisions we're making, that will come back to the other direction. When our guys are down there, they are paid for by Poplar Bluff or whoever that utility is that they report to. When anybody comes to us, we're also paying for that. And that was why we have a reserve fund. And it is a significant reserve fund. And unfortunately, those activities are very expensive. So having an appropriate and robust reserve fund is something that we need to manage and keep an eye on. And we'll talk about this later today in our as we talk about budget and O&M budget coming through. So those things are important. Any questions on that?
I had a question, but I think you just said we were going to talk about it when we got to the budget.
Okay.
I was just wondering, because you put we had a shortage,
The reserve is below
Yes,
below the minimum.
so I wondered what the reserve is supposed to be and how short we are.
That is great questions, and Paul is going to be able to answer that as soon as we get to it. And that is, thank you. Very, very, very good. Second item that I have for my report is talking about the Indian Mound substation. I've got in the packet some pictures, and I apologize, I did not have them put up on the screen for everybody to see. But if you do look at the agenda and take a look at those pictures, you'll see that it's a pretty significant effort. We are rebuilding the Indian Mound substation. The old station, which on the pictures is closest to the water tank, was built in about early 1970s. So it's well over 50 years right now, about 55. With that, one of the things that you do with a transformer is kind of a bucket full of very hot wires sitting in oil. And if you add water to that, that water turns immediately to steam, expands, blows up. That's bad, okay? What we do is we have bottles of nitrogen, an inert gas that we are constantly pushing into those transformers, keeping the moisture absolutely out. And what we have seen over time is some of those things wear out. You have more and more. We're measuring, monitoring, always doing the maintenance on them, but it is time for that to be changed and replaced. We're in time, we're safe, want you to know that, but it is absolutely, these things do have a life, and 55 years is pushing that life. So we needed to replace that transformer. The other thing about the Indian Mound substation is if you want to look at this, and maybe Lowe's may not be happy to hear this, I wish Mr. Fisher was here, is that if you drive in and you're looking at Lowe's, if you go to the back left corner, you can look right down off the hill and this is what you'll see. This is where these pictures were taken from. And this work that they're doing is very, very precise. When you build these things, it's to the mills. It's that fine. When they set all of the parts and breakers and switches and things that have to be going with that. So they're doing a great job for us. This was built, was planned several years ago. We had the engineer's estimate of cost for this project pre-COVID. And with that, some of those costs, especially for the transformer itself, escalated. And so there are costs that are above what that original cost was pre-COVID to now, which is also added to part of that shortage in our reserve fund. So that's part of what we're hitting there. And we're in the midst of this project. We have the transformer that is now sitting in St. Louis. It will be on time, delivered, be set, and then they'll continue the construction to build breakers, switches, et cetera, to get it back into line. And then finally, the fence around it will be constructed and it'll be christened and put online. This is a portion of town which is almost what I kind of call this heart, because it is right by Lowe's, very close to Walmart. It is that central part of town. We do not want to have this portion of town become questionable in any way. And so we are appreciative of the contractors, engineers that have been involved, and especially of staff that have helped ramrod this and make it all happen. Any questions on that? Yeah.
Darren, just out of curiosity, about what time frame are you anticipating that transformer?
The transformer coming in, I believe we're about 2 months away.
April 15th.
April 15th.
Month.
Yeah, 1 month, 2. So it's coming fast. That's it for my report.
All right, anybody have questions, Darren?
I don't know.
All right, thanks very much. Moving right along to Matt Munslinger for your operations and projects, please.
Good afternoon. Just to go through an operations report rather quickly. I know it's a nice day outside and I'd rather be out there, as I assume you all would as well. So if you look at our electric side of things, like Darren kind of alluded to earlier, we had minimal issues with the Friday night storm. The previous week, I believe it was, we had some 40, 50 mile an hour gust, and we had one issue, I think, with that event as well. Overall, for the month of February, we continued at 99.994% reliability. We had 4 outages. 3 of the 4 were squirrel related. That's something we're continuing to focus on. We're down to almost just backyard transformers that need this equipment, the squirrel guards installed. And so continuing to work with that. We're also, with the start of the warmer weather, we started doing construction and moving some lines to the front of the yards rather than in the backyards where they're hard to get equipment to, cost more to maintain as it relates to tree trimming and such. And so we're focusing on Starlight Ridge and the Sue Ellen Drive areas. On the water side of things, something that happened just last week and not during the month of February, but we had an EPA inspection. This is something that the EPA started doing about 3 years ago in the aftermath of the Flint, Michigan, and also I think it was Jackson, Mississippi water issue. They're actually going out and doing inspections. They had the 12th and 13th scheduled to be here. We were able to provide the information that they needed and had the inspection completed on the 12th. We've got 8 items that we've got to address, none of them major. We have some updates they'd like to see in our emergency response plan as it relates to federal regulation. They'd like to see a more robust valve exercising program. That's something we're in the process of developing already. The other focused around our lead and copper testing sites. We have to do 30 sites, and sometimes you have a site that maybe it was a renter and a new renter is at that site, and so you don't get the participation that you'd like to see. And so they'd like to see us have more, like 60 people in the queue to do the testing, and that way we can provide all the tier 1 sites. We already know we have a water loss issue, and we're already working on that. They want us to check our flapper valves at our water tanks on our weekly checklist, and so that's just a matter of getting it included on our checklist so that when our crews go out and do it, they can check the box and say yes, it was done. They'd like to see some screens installed at a couple locations on our water plant, and then we had some chemical feed pumps that, due to the nature of the chemical, it's hard to keep it all in the pipe. They'll crystallize around some of the fittings and stuff, and so they'd like to see us address those. So all in all, we think we fared rather well with that inspection. We're working with staff to get a response that is due to them within 15 days of last Thursday. After we complete that, they'll put out a draft report in roughly 70 days, at which time that report will also be provided also to enforcement to see if there's any further action from the EPA side of things. We're not anticipating anything at this point, but we'll see how that comes out. You'll see on the water production side of things, our daily production has been higher than it has the previous 2 years, so that's a good thing. We're continuing to try to track down and address any water loss issues that we can find. We have settled on that our meters that we just recently installed at the plant are accurate, and some of the temporary meters, we're making modifications of them further out in the system so that we can again track where that water is going. Staff at the water plant provided the major water user and tier 2 report to the government as required, and our next media exchange is tentatively scheduled for April 14th. We had 5 leaks on the water system, all of which were repaired. The largest one of those was out at Walgreens, between Walgreens and CVS. It was going directly into a storm sewer, nothing coming to the surface, and so if we hadn't paid attention to the water coming out of the storm sewer, we wouldn't have known it was there. So on the wastewater treatment plant side of things, it was a relatively quiet month. One thing that we do on an annual basis is we bring in an outside vendor to do maintenance on our influent pumps at the wastewater plant, and also all of our lift station pumps. That was completed last month. Moving on to collection, we had 0 SSOs, and we just continued to do what we could out in the field with the weather that we had. That pretty much wraps up my operations report, unless you all have any questions about anything that is in the report or anything else you'd like to know.
What was the equipment over on Meredith? You said you had an equipment failure.
Oh, I don't know exactly what the equipment failure was. I'll get with the crew and get back to you on that.
Okay, that's fine.
Matt, a suggestion or comment, whatever. The city of Hannibal has the building inspector go through all non-owner occupied residents every 3 years and gives them a certificate of occupancy.
Mm-hmm.
So you may, unless you're already doing it, coordinate with the actual inspector that does a schedule to come out and test the electric and all that stuff. Use his schedule to tag along and take the sample of the lead.
Okay.
Or show them how and ask them to do it for you. I'm sure
The lead testing that we do is we do it on a 3-year basis with the Department of Natural Resources, and so we don't have to test every person. We just have to provide 30. What they're looking for is basically the corrosivity of our water to prove that the water we're producing isn't stripping that lead from a service line.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've just recently, this past fall, completed our 3-year test, And so we don't anticipate any future testing for another 3 years.
So
You
do
said
you,
that they needed a list of about 30 or 60 or so?
We take 30 tests.
Okay.
They would like for us to have a pool of 60. That way, if somebody moved or we can't gain access to a house or somebody refuses to test, then we would look for somebody else.
Yeah,
Just an alternate.
It's just that the city inspector is there
Okay.
typically every year, or at least when somebody turns their house into a rental, and they're supposed to get a certificate of occupancy
Yep.
for apartments and or houses that they're renting, and that might gain you access when you might not
Okay.
easily get it. That's all.
Sounds good.
so are the 30 testings done like all at once, or do you do them over the 3-year period?
We do it all
or-
at once.
Okay.
And then what we try to do is try to do the same houses or same residences every time. That way we have that history and can look and see if there's any change in it. And that's an issue with some of these rental places is sometimes first person is agreeable to it, does the testing, provides it, and then you get a change of renter and then you don't have access to that site anymore.
All right, anybody have questions of Matt on operation? If not, we can move right into projects if you would.
Projects, we kind of talked about the water loss. It's something we're continuing to track. One purchase we did make and some preparations we are doing is we bought a portable meter so that we can use in-house. It will tie into our automatic meter reading system. And so we can isolate different portions of town and compare what we're getting on our meter that is located on a main with all those customer meters within that project area. And that's something that we look to deploy here within the next couple of weeks. We'll put it out in a location, leave it there for a week or maybe even 2, and compare that water sales just to check what our customer meters are reading. If there's a big discrepancy, then we'll do further investigation and try to isolate, what's causing that discrepancy. So
And that would be tied in through the SCADA system, so it'll all be
the
live
metering
reading?
system, which would report hourly, I think, is what the water meters presently do. So
That's great.
sewer side of things is kind of quiet. We're planning for this summer's construction season. North Street, the storm sewer project, phase 1, they're hoping to get the last of the box culvert in either later this week or early next week. Then they'll have some concrete structures to pour. They've already started restoration efforts along North Street, pouring some curb and some sidewalk. We're working on getting an easement for some additional work that needs to be done down there before they can complete all the street restoration. Phase 2, we had a public meeting on March 4th. Kind of talked with some of the property owners about access issues as we move into phase 2, which will probably start sometime in April. And then phase 3, we're continuing to work with the Corps of Engineers as they're the people that we have to work with as they have the money that came from the WRDA appropriation. Again, it'll probably be later summer of this year before it goes out to bid. And in Bear Creek Dam, we're continuing to work with the engineering contractor to get the necessary paperwork, and then we'll work with the contractor on construction schedule. On the electrical side of things, as Darren alluded to earlier, construction on Indian Mound continues. Last week they set the control building. I believe it was last Tuesday. And we tentatively have the transformer scheduled to be delivered April 15th. We're hoping to get everything installed and it checked out sometime July, August timeframe. And then it'll be put online, and then we'll disconnect the old substation and work on the decommissioning of it.
All right.
That's all I've got, unless y'all have questions.
I have a question on the North Street project. I'm sure you guys have heard it too. There's quite a bit of mudslinging going on with the property owner down there. Have you guys met with her?
Can I say that it's the property renter?
Renter, okay.
That yes, the property renter is unhappy at the speed of it. And currently, we've dealt with the property owner. We have a fix for the sewer line that's coming out of that establishment. So let me give a little bit of color. When we started the project, you start at the bottom of the hill. Her property, or the property she's renting, is right there closest to the river. So that's where we had to start. You start there and you start laying all of these stormwater pipe in the ground. And we moved right up that and right into the park, which is then going to go straight up Mark Twain Avenue. As we got right to this property she's renting, her sewer line was built into the top of the storm drain, which it was I'm sure it was great workmanship, but you don't do that. And as they removed it, that broke it out, and so we had to put a temporary fix for that sewer. And we put a 1,000-gallon tank just about in the middle of the road. It's in city right-of-way in the road. There is no other place to put it. And we put it there, and we let that effluent go into that storage tank. And it's been doing that since the beginning of the project. 3 months or 4 months, whatever, I can't remember. But it's been going into that storage tank. Now we need to fix that. Could we have engineered it right away? The answer is no. Because as you're going up North Street, you have this property and you have several others, and we had 3 other properties up here that also have sewer. We didn't know if they had the exact same structure. Therefore, we had to wait for that contractor to get up through and past those 3 other homes before we could engineer a fix. Were we going to have to take these 3 other homes and tie them into this sewer and bring it down to a lift station and over? So once we got up to here, we were then able to engineer, and we've done this as quickly as we can. The engineer said, no, these actually are able to go gravity feed to the sewer that's on the other side of the line and coming down parallel with this stormwater. The fix for this property here, we're going to take and put a new line that comes out from their existing sewer line, 90 it right down to the corner of their property, and we're going to put a lift station right there. We're going to move power to the back portion of that property to power this, and then we're going to pump that effluent into the sewer. And while the current owner has this property, we are going to be paying the electric bill. As soon as there's a change of deed, someone else buys that property, that's going to become that new property owner's responsibility. This is part of, we've needed the easement so we could get in and build it. We have to have the right to get in there on that property. We have taken that to the homeowner, the property owner. That property owner is out of state. As soon as they've signed that, notarized it, sent it back to us, we will then tell the contractor, okay, get it built. They believe they can get that built probably within 2 days. Am I correct? And that they can do it in about 2 days. They can do it early in the morning so it doesn't disturb their existing proprietor, and then we're off and running. So right now, it's in the hands of getting that easement signed, notarized, returned to us.
So we
And we're
are
waiting.
in communication with the property owner.
Yes,
We're just not
We've tried to
working to our
communicate.
best with the property renter.
we are doing our.
I mean, we are doing our best, but she's not
we
hearing what
have
she wants to hear.
we have other things that we're sending. We have sent it by email. We have sent it by. We've called. We have also sent it by certified mail. So we're using all the means possible to communicate with the person that's renting.
Okay. Good job.
Thank you. And we've done it in person.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a
Thank you.
great, thank you for the question.
Question for, phase 2. Where are you gonna go when you start digging out? I know what's going up the travel lane of Mark Twain Avenue, but you've gotta have some place to go with the spoils that you're digging out. Where are you gonna go?
They'll be hauled away.
It's gonna be hauled away? Okay,
They'll have to fill with granular backfill because it's under a roadway.
okay.
The plan is to condense that to 2 lanes, one lane in each direction. and have one lane as a buffer, and then be working in the two westbound lanes or northbound lanes.
All right. You answered my question. Thank you.
How long is that gonna take? Because that's quite a bit more of a, I don't want to hold you to a time.
It should go a little quicker than what the existing contract is taking. We should be in better weather. Granted, it does drain quite a bit of area, and so there's quite a bit of water that comes down there. And they don't have to bolt the sections together. We're up out of the floodplain, so the sections will just be typical box culvert sections that they seal and push together, and so it should go quicker.
If I remember correctly, didn't
3
they
months,
have
I think, is what they have.
3 months? Wasn't there some of the buildings that had, I don't know if you call them manholes, but they were collapsing? Is that going to affect any of that? Or is that going to be able to be fixed during that process?
We are moving the storm sewer out into public right of way. The existing storm sewer still may run under private property, which there are no easements for. And so that would have to be addressed on a case-by-case basis.
So it would stink to get all that done and then have to go fix that other part of it.
That's going to remain. From a legal standpoint, it's not public sewer and it's not a public right-of-way. Every bit of that, you can tell both from historic plus other documentation, was all built by the individual property owners. What that was a ditch/creek, and when they wanted to use the front part of their property, they built over that. And that's why when you go down into that storm sewer, you will find that there's brick, there's concrete, there's ductile iron, it's crazy all the different things that are down there, and it's because everybody built their own storm sewer and just hooked on to whatever the last guy that covered his over had done. So from a legal standpoint, the city has no obligation to fill or do those other things. The reason why we have a legal obligation is because there's water going into it, et cetera, et cetera. So there's an argument that we have some legal obligation. By establishing this new sewer run, there is a very strong argument that the city no longer has responsibility on the old stuff. I would argue that perhaps we didn't have responsibility on it before, but none of that stuff was built by the city, and that's why it's such a mess, quite frankly.
Okay. I kind of remember us talking about that a little bit in the stormwater, but, okay, thank you.
So then you're saying that basically everything that comes off of the hill isn't gonna make it to what's there now? Because you're gonna cut it off?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying we don't own that storm system. I'm saying that is private ownership. There is water that's coming from other properties and going through there. Without getting too far into the weeds, the law in Missouri is such that as long as there's reasonable use made regarding transporting water, you're not liable. What our plan is, and by our I mean the city, I don't know. That's a question for the board. But what I'm saying is, we don't own that stuff. If we move the storm sewer into the public right of way, regardless of whether there's something left there or not, I would be my suggestion that's probably no longer our responsibility. But I have not gone over plans, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know.
Anywhere it hits public right of way, we're going to try to make the connection. So it's going to take flow off that existing storm sewer and hopefully extend the life of it.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else have any questions? Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.
And moving right along to Paul, please.
All right, financial report for February, starting with the balance sheet. Total cash did increase about $182,000 from the month before and is still down about $3.4 million from a year ago. Again, this decrease is due to those ongoing capital projects that we spoke of in the electric and water funds, as well as the higher costs that we've seen for capacity this fiscal year. We did see a significant increase in current assets from last month. The majority of the capacity that we've went out and hedged for next planning year, we had to go out and prepay for that. And so because that planning year doesn't begin until June of 2025, we've recorded that as a prepaid expense, and then we will recognize it on our income statement every month that that occurs. So utility-wide, total assets are up about 1.5% from a month ago and about 0.2% more than a year ago. So the income statement now compared to budget, utility-wide, we did finish the month with a positive net income of $731,000 for the second month in a row. The electric fund led the way with a net income of about $567,000. The main reason for that is that we've got Prairie State back up and running full bore, and so we did receive significantly more back in MISO credits than what we had budgeted for the month. And so fortunately, we've seen benefit with that with these last couple of cold snaps that we saw in January and February. In the water fund, like Matt mentioned, we didn't have a carbon changeout expense this month, and so we saw another positive month for that fund. And then the sewer fund also did better than expected, as operating expenses came in about $27,000 less than budgeted. Looking back a year ago, the electric fund did perform better again this year. Net purchase power was actually more than the previous year, but it was revenues that were up significantly from the previous year, and specifically kilowatt hour sales in the electric fund were 5.4% more than they were a year ago, and they were also 1.2% better than the 5-year average. So that's a positive sign with a little bit of growth in the electric fund. The water fund also performed better this year, again due to not having a carbon changeout expense, and the sewer fund did slightly worse. If we do look at gallons sold in both of those funds, they were comparable, though, with the year before. Year to date, we are now 8 months into fiscal year 25, and so if we again update our budget to reflect the 9% rate increase that we did in electric, no rate increase in water, and if we take capacity and amortize it for the full year, the full 12 months of our fiscal year, the electric fund now sits at a net loss about $524,000 more than budgeted. Revenues are right at budget, but it's purchase power that continues to run high for us this year. The water fund now has surpassed its budgeted net income, and so it's tracking right along with budget. And the sewer fund is as well. We do have operating expenses that are running slightly higher, about $59,000 in that fund. Just an update on the compressors. They are expected to arrive, I believe, this week at the wastewater plant, and so we will certainly get those installed as quickly as possible to alleviate the issue of having to rent one, which we've been doing for the last several months there at the wastewater plant. That'll certainly cut back on our cost in that fund. At this same point a year ago, if we compare back, the utility-wide net loss is almost identical to what it was last year. However, it's for much different reasons. Revenues are up 6.3% utility-wide, but net purchase power is up 11.1% from a year ago. And then we have operating expenses that are about 2.3% more than last year. We'll scroll down and look at page 26 with the positive performance in all three funds. We did have improvement in the debt service coverage ratio in all three funds. The electric fund now sits at a negative 2.48. Water is at 1.81 and sewer is at 3.59. So obviously in electric we don't have any anticipation of meeting the rate covenant that is established with our debt in the electric fund this year. We've made that clear to bond counsel, and what we'll discuss later on is our budget for next fiscal year that does have us returning back to compliance with that rate covenant next year. I will remind everyone that the higher capacity that we do pay is in those fall seasons that we've already gone through, and then they'll now ramp back up here as we enter spring. It'll actually be recognized on our March, April, and May invoices, and so those will be, we'll go from actually receiving a credit of about $36 a day for capacity to paying about just under $20,000 a day for that capacity for the rest of this planning year. Scroll down
I'm sorry, would you say that again?
Yep. So the capacity that we pay for the planning year that runs from June to May is broke up into 4 seasons: summer, fall, winter, spring. And if you'll recall at that auction last year, that high price that blew out occurred for the fall and the spring seasons. And so for these winter seasons, which was December, January, and February, we've actually basically paid nothing for capacity because we had hedged for that winter season. We were actually receiving a credit of about $36 a day from that. So for the spring season that starts here in March, we'll pay about $20,000 a day for that same capacity.
Okay, thank you.
So scroll down a few more pages. Page 29 is where we look at our cash reserves. And right now, the electric fund sits at about $9.6 million as of the end of February. Our minimum that's calculated there for reserves in the electric fund is about $12.6 million. And so we are short from that minimum by about just about $3 million. And so that's what Darren alluded to earlier, that the budget that we'll look at for next fiscal year, we're going to look at hopefully turning that around and getting headed back in the other direction by replenishing some of those reserves that we've lost here these last few years with the volatility that we've seen in our purchase power. I do update that calculation of that minimum reserve after we complete our budget, and so we will re-look at that definitely as we continue to work towards finishing that budget for next fiscal year. I think that's all the information I had to report on. Is there any questions at this time?
Well, the revenue that we get off of the bonds or instruments that we hold in reserves, that is not able to be attributed to the debt service ratio, right?
No, it is. You're talking about so with our reserves, we have those invested in several CDs, things like that. Yeah, that does factor in as revenue to us on an annual basis. We budgeted about $300,000 for that revenue in the current fiscal year, and we'll look at that for next fiscal year. It's going to come down a little bit just because reserves have come down so much. But if there was any way for us to make more on that, on those instruments that we invest in, that would certainly help us. However, we're pretty well handicapped in what we can do there because of what the state requires.
I recall reading the bond covenant, and I thought that it was only from sales activities, from revenue from sales activities of electric that could be attributed to that. It didn't necessarily identify the ability to use interest income from reserves to go towards that.
We would probably want to verify that, because I know when they look at it, when we do our annual disclosure, they take that audited revenue, and that audited revenue does include that interest revenue in it.
Okay.
But yeah, if it came down to actually determining whether or not that it could be included, I guess the trustee on the bond would have to tell us otherwise.
Well, and our analysts say yes, so
Right.
we shouldn't say no.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Anybody have questions of Paul? Can't think of any. Thank you very much. And looks like you get to move right into unfinished business.
All right. So looking at our operating budget for next fiscal year, 2026, I'll remind you that we did just have the board approve our 5-year capital plan a couple months ago. And so that looks at all of our capital spending that we project to do for the next 5 fiscal years. That cash outlay that we would spend for capital does factor into our budget and whether or not we add to or reduce our reserves in a given fiscal year. However, it does not factor into the operating revenues and expenses that we would recognize on a yearly basis. And so what we're looking at here is those revenues that we bring in based on the services that we provide in a fiscal year, and then all of the expenses. Apologize. All of the expenses that we would bring or that we would pay for in that same fiscal year. But what we thought that we would do tonight, you've got the copy of the draft there in front of you. There we go. And so rather than go through this thing in fine detail, we thought that we would do like we've done the last several fiscal years and go ahead and schedule a budget workshop where the board and myself and Darren and staff could sit down and go through this thing with some more detail. Obviously, you've only had it for a couple days, and so we do want to give you adequate time to go through it, jot down some information, ask some questions, and then that way we can do a workshop and go through it with much more detail. And we were proposing a date for that of potentially April 10th, which would be a Thursday, doing that at our normal board meeting time, 4 p.m., if that would work for everybody. But certainly open to any suggestions or questions that you have on that. Yes, yeah, it'd have to be a special meeting, and so, yeah, the public would be informed and invited to attend, just like any other board meeting. So I think we would probably have to do a motion and just to schedule that, right, Courtney?
Yeah, go ahead.
Or if you have a better date that would work for you.
I currently work that day. So.
You're working that day?
Mm-hmm.
You have a day that week that might.
We could do it a week earlier, like the 3rd, or the 8th is a Tuesday.
We do the 8th because I know I'm off that day. If I work Thursday, then I work Sunday, Thursday. So I
Okay.
can do Tuesday.
And there's not a city council meeting that evening. Surely we wouldn't go that long, but
Election day. Make sure you vote.
It's election day?
Yes.
He got that plug in there, didn't he?
we want to shoot for the 8th at 4.
8th is good for me.
I think that'll work. I might have to move a few things around, but it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay. Well, we've got 3 or 4 weeks between now and then to change that if we need to. But we can certainly plan for that. And so just quickly here, just to kind of orient yourself and what we're looking at. Again, the first page of this budget just shows our total summary of revenues that we project to bring in based on the charges for services, expenses, which would include all types of things such as salaries, materials, contracted services, fringe benefits, things of that nature. That gives us our net income or net loss for the year, and then we're able to add back depreciation, subtract out our capital spending that we project for the next fiscal year, and then subtract out our debt principal, and that gives us a total cash contribution or reduction to the reserve fund for the next fiscal year. So that's kind of the premise of what we'll go through in finer detail. The next page just gives you that same summary.
Paul, I'm going to ask you to go right back to that screen. So our media is here because we talked about a nominal increase in the electric. And that's because part of our cash reserve policy, you see that our minimum reserve, we are below the minimum reserve for our electric. And so we have in our cash policy, and I'll be sharing that with you, it directs the general manager to change that direction. And you can see that we've at least flattened, but we need to improve that. And it's, so with the cash reserve policy, we need to look at and consider a nominal, I don't even have a number for you, a small increase in that electric so that we're going in the right way so that we start replenishing that minimum reserve and staying healthy. You'll see that the other are in good shape, but that would just be one consideration. So that's something we'll be discussing on the 8th in more detail. Go ahead and go to the next page, Paul, and I'm going to stop right at the very top of the next page. One of the other things that's good is that some people will come in and say, I don't know, I don't deal with budgets. This is something that's foreign to me. Paul and I and several of us, we've looked at budgets enough and it got to where it tells a story. And this is where you can go through, every single person in the world can go through just kind of with two fingers. Look what we did last year, look what we're doing this year. And if that number is too large, or you don't understand why, you ask the question, why? And that's a beautiful question. There's nothing wrong with that. And Paul, I think with any one of those lines, between Paul and staff, we can answer those questions. Why is this number higher? Why is this number lower? And it tells a story about what we're doing and why. And so please don't let it, if you feel uncomfortable with what a budget is, this is what you've got to have. You've got to have something to compare it to. What happened last year? Why is it changing? What's the answer for that change? And that's exactly what you do with budgets. That's what we want to be doing at the budget workshop. All right, I'll get off my soapbox. Go ahead, Paul.
No, yeah, thank you.
And it was very helpful last year, I think.
So that's really all I wanted to point out. Then, and then we drill down more specifically into detail with each fund: electric, water, sewer, stormwater. And that's really hard to see, but each fund is made up of several departments, and so we will meet with that department head and look at those expenses and what we want to budget for the next year. And each department is made up of several general ledger accounts or GL accounts, and so that's what we're looking at here on an account by account basis for each department within each fund. But we will. This is what I'm talking about, getting into the weeds. There's a lot to report on here that we'll get into during that budget workshop. And then the final page on here is, again, what I mentioned, our our capital spending for next fiscal year, and I apologize, it's so hard to see. But again, that's what we would project to spend in each fund with capital, and that cash outlay would then factor into that addition or reduction to the reserve for the upcoming fiscal year. All right, so April 8th at 4, we will plan on that. Are there any questions, though, at this time?
Paul, what is our budget from last year to this year? What is the overall difference?
Yeah, so right now we're looking at a 3.7% decrease in our budget for next year compared to this current year overall in expenses is what we're showing.
These figures are based on current rates in all funds.
Yes.
I believe so, yeah.
Did this, and I guess I'm understanding this was just handed out to the board members today. Is there a chance that
I think it's on the book. It's in the packet.
Friday, yeah.
Yeah, you have access to it.
Okay, thank you.
When is this required to be submitted to the?
Oh, yeah, great point. Yeah, so our timeline here is, excellent point. It has to be provided to City Hall by May 15th. And then it would be approved with the rest of the city's budgets at that second May meeting. I'm not sure the exact date, but it'd be the third Tuesday of May. In addition to that, another big portion of our budget that we talk about every year is that MISO capacity auction. We will, fortunately, we are hedged for a very large portion of that, so it won't have a huge impact on us, but those results will be posted April 28th. And so that'll actually be after our budget workshop and after our board meeting where we approve the budget in April. However, there could be some numbers that we would want to update based on the results of that auction. Yeah.
I know that's a tight timeframe, but if you're talking about potential nominal rate increase, does it make sense to wait until after the 28th and then look at finalizing your draft of the budget to send to City Hall? Because you're kind of you're saying that you're going to potentially have to increase nominal on the electric side of things, but if you don't know what that auction price is actually, and I understand that a lot of that is hedged, but.
Yeah, so we're trying to, we wish we could get it to you yesterday. And so we still have that auction, which is a huge player in our rates and what's happening on that electric front. And we're trying to get it as, so we'll have our meeting, we're gonna go through it, take a look at everything that we can control. And that's where, I wanted to say, we've reduced this by 3.5%. And if you look at the total price, that's a lot of money. So we've tried to really trim to be as tight as we can with those things we can control. And then we're going to be able to, but that outlier is purchase power. And it's been a very volatile market. And that's what we can't nail it down until after that April 28th. And once that auction is in there, we can plug that in. And so I think we can get very close. All of those other things that we can control, that you're going to be able to see, that's what we have budgeted. But and I guess, thank you very much for the question. That's one of those things that we cannot control until we see it.
But won't those figures then be included to what you?
It's going to have to be put into this. Yep, we're going to have to.
15th, it's only.
Yeah, we
weeks,
can,
but you do.
we will be able to get it in there by the 15th.
Okay.
Yes.
That meeting, by the way, for city council will be the 20th.
Okay.
20th.
Okay.
So.
And when do we go before P&Z with the capital budget?
This Thursday.
This Thursday. So we try and get everything to the city just as quick as we can as we have it.
For most public utilities, on the same fiscal year, if the MISO auction is April 28th, I just wonder if everybody's pushing to make that fit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question.
They vary, but a lot of them are that middle of the year,
Right.
fiscal year.
A lot of it, obviously the reason we are on that fiscal year is because the city is, and so with that being in tandem, but yeah, that's a good point. It does make it really tight.
Yeah, they just give you that right before you have to approve your budget.
One thing is, it was not important until the auctions came around and they split it up into quarterly and jacked the price up to $719. So they didn't care about our fiscal time of year. But yeah, Daryl, it definitely makes sense. We're gonna go through the budget review and cover 98% of everything, including expenses and why things are up or down. And then the major plug-in will be when we know what that auction says. So yeah, it does make sense. Anybody have any questions or don't know what they need to do to go through the comparison to be ready for the 8th?
Yeah, and if there's anything we can provide ahead of time that we want to go over, feel free to reach out.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks very much, Paul.
Thank you.
And moving on to comments. Oh, we need a motion for the
There
April.
might be an issue with that because I forgot I traded into the 8th. Can we do the 7th?
Oh, can we do the 7th?
Can we do the 7th instead?
Monday the 7th, better?
Monday's always better for me.
I don't think we have any problem with April 7th, do we? No, April 7th would work for us.
Great.
Yep, April 7th's good.
Meeting has changed from the 8th to the 7th.
Yes.
That's much better.
Do I hear a motion to have the
I'll make that motion.
Mooney in a second?
I'll
In
second.
favor?
Aye.
Now, what time on the 7th?
4 o'clock.
p.m.
4 o'clock. Very good.
Okay. All right, do we have any comments from city attorney?
No.
All right, any general discussion before we go into closed session? Having heard none, do I?
There's a sticky note on that.
No. If you want to make a motion to go into closed session, those are the people that need it.
I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session pursuant to section 610.021, 1 and 12 of the Missouri Sunshine Law. The meeting shall convene in closed session to discuss litigation and contracts. Closed session includes the board members, Darren, Matt, Paul, Courtney, and the city attorney.
Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right.
We're in closed session. Thanks, everybody, for coming.